try to kind of talk a little bit.
So that I have not.
Ready? Call the meeting to order with pledge of flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You really want that by me? For the record, this is the Stark County Council monthly meeting, Monday, April 19th. The council is present and formed. Do some quick housekeeping. Have a signature for February 16th. I'll let Brad sign it last, so we make sure we get it to Rachel, and then I'll entertain a motion for March 15th, 2021. Have a motion, is there a second? A second from Kay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And is there any opposed? All ayes.
She didn't say anything. Did she say wait?
Well, why don't we go ahead and start?
She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
You want to sit here? You want to
If
stand?
you like.
You do whatever you want.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Todd Samuelson, a partner with Baker Tilly. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to set the table or you want me to go ahead. You go. All right. So Rachel contacted us to see if we would be able to come this evening and talk about the American Rescue Plan. And we did a webinar on this, I don't know, 10 days ago or so. Maybe Rachel listened in, I'm not exactly sure, but we made it available to folks that wanted to get some more information. I'll preface all of my comments here this evening with more information still yet to come from the U.S. Treasury regarding guidelines on how the program can be used, how the dollars can be spent, etc. So big picture, the Stark County, like every county in Indiana, I think like every county in the United States, is going to receive funding from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan. You're probably fully aware of that. So the amount of money identified for Stark County is 4.46 million-ish. If you're going to ask me how they calculated the dollars, I don't know the answer. But that is the amount of money that has been identified for Stark County. As you probably have heard on the news or read about the American Rescue Plan, it is vast in terms of what's included within the plan. The amount of direct funding that the county will receive is just one element that you may be able to access dollars for various purposes. And so what I'm going to try to do this evening in a short amount of time is to give an overview of the ARP and then really just take questions best, and I'll try to answer and address those best that I can. So this is the actual slides for the webinar. It's a little clunky in terms of, there's a question at the end that I'm going to ask. We're not going to do that. But it's, I think, a very good resource at this point in time. So I'm going to cover, again, an overview, some strategies to think about what types of eligible expenditures you can use the funding for, again, with more guidance anticipated. And then just some things to considerations or questions to kind of think about as you prepare to receive these monies. And in that regard, well, I don't want to jump ahead of this. So if you get on page, or turn to page 3, Anybody else want to hear that? Okay. Is that okay with everybody? Be exclusive, right? There'll be a quiz at the end. So on page 3, this slide cover or identifies areas within the American Rescue Plan that are out there and will be available. The first column under orange, which is referred to as the fiscal recovery funds, that is actually where your dollars are coming from within the total ARP umbrella. So out of the 350 billion that is been made available, and again, these are referred to as non-competitive. They're not competing for these dollars. They will be coming. So that under that orange column is your 4.46 million. These other provisions are not all of these are directly related to the county. For example, you'll see schools, 170 billion. So Knox schools within Indiana throughout the country are also receiving dollars. Their uses are, as you might imagine, slightly different. But I'll come back to why that may be important. The city of Knox is going to get money. So they're not only what the county is going to receive, there's going to be other dollars flowing in to Stark County as well. There are other programs that are identified for small businesses. Specifically, some of the industry segments are identified that have been particularly hit by the pandemic: restaurants, bars, housing, public health, emergency connectivity. So the reason that we're breaking this out like this at this point is that yes, you're going to get money directly, but as you think about how you want to apply that funding and what type of priorities you want to address, there may be other programs to also consider. Now, those may be competitive dollars to go after, but there could be other dollars available to the county depending on, and you'll see when we go through here, we're recommending develop a strategy, develop kind of a list of projects and programs that you may be interested in funding that fit within the qualifications. And then it's somewhat like a game of Tetris, it could be Tetris, of matching funding and projects to try to leverage as many dollars as possible into the county.
Could I just interject real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid I'll forget to the end, but since Marty's here and Mark's here too, because this is more of a commissioner thing. We were working on an infrastructure funding and just a project for better connectivity in Stark County. It's CenturyLink, we're at their mercy. It's horrible. I mean, it drops all the time, and then their customer service says, "Oh, that's not true. It's only you. You need to replace your wiring," all this stuff. Jump through all these hoops, and it's just garbage. Have we had any progress? Because I mean, out of everything that we've suffered in Stark County, we've got all these kids that are at home, and it's killed our internet. But we have people like we do business at home, and we do government business, through the internet. It's horrible here. So, do we know anything about the previous efforts that were going on for connectivity?
I don't think there's anything new. If anything, CenturyLink is allowing their network to degrade even further. I can't tell you how many wiring terminals I've seen on the side of the road that look like they got destroyed
those are terrible too. But
over the last.
right. So like something.
No, it's a good segue to the next page.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to bring that in because I didn't know if anything had been done yet at all. Mine's really good.
So in a way, sorry, just to make this quick, that prior deal was this broadband readiness program.
Yeah.
Okay, and now, it really wasn't linked with any actual, as far as I know, it wasn't linked with any project.
No.
It just made it easier for a company that wanted to do a project to get it permitted.
Yeah.
I mean, am I wrong? I mean, you remember.
It was more of like an awareness.
I've been involved in several of them with different counties.
Yeah.
Where they've put in gigantic broadband infrastructure. I don't know how it was funded or how it's done, but Elkhart County is like funding St. Joe County. They're putting all of St. Joe counties in through Elkhart County.
Okay.
Really?
Okay.
Well, I know CenturyLink isn't putting any money in
Yeah,
here.
but there wasn't a proposal to do any, so there is apparently there's money sources, but there was never a proposal to actually build anything as far as I know.
We can stream 4 or 5 things at the same time.
Yeah. So, I mean, even like some study, like you could use some of those dollars just for a study, how to figure out how to make it better here because we need
Somebody
improvement.
do it, yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah, and
And
then,
wireless is terrible too.
yeah, wireless, that's true.
What's a good segue to slide
Okay.
4 here? When we focus just on the fiscal recovery funds, again, that's where the 4.46 million comes in. So what can you use that money for? And I'm not suggesting you're going to go out and pay for everything broadband related.
Oh,
But if you look in the middle of that schedule, investments in sewer, water, broadband, eligible use of the 4.46. Now,
well, I know they knew we were gonna ask about pension funds, so they made sure they got that in
Yeah,
there.
it sure did.
in big print.
So that immediately.
Sorry, not eligible for pension. So the 4 point, what can you use it for? Respond to public health emergency. Now, that's pretty broad, right? Respond to workers performing essential work. So EMS goes on the front line that have been dealing with the pandemic.
I'd really like an aerial.
Additional funding for those individuals. If you have experienced revenue loss, and I'll come back to that. but
Okay,
those
because
can be-
I specifically want to ask you about something when it comes to revenue loss
Let's
as
do
well.
it
So,
now.
okay, so aside from other things, we've lost obviously revenue on the road department, and that's going to impact us all hard. So that's, we've lost revenue on our jail because we weren't taking inmates. But one of the other areas where we lost just below $200,000 is investments. You must be hearing this from other counties.
Yes.
The banks totally screwed us. Like they could have given us a warning and said, hey, just so you know, when the economy gets better and everything else happens, CD rates are going to go down. So don't put your money in CDs. And so, like we're tenths of a penny on a dollar with our investment. So right now we're even holding our money. So I looked and I see that the state has an investment consortium
Mhm.
that's like statewide, but like, does that help with any of those lost revenues for things like that?
And since we're talking about revenue loss, let's go ahead and turn to page 10 for a second. We ran out of room. You're not going to see investment income on here. But as we think about revenue loss, these are the categories that come to mind. There may be others specific to Stark County.
Yes.
So this is, again, the type of thinking that we're recommending to consider all the revenue sources that the county has. And the basic rule, and the state board put out some information around this as well in the last few weeks, is you look at the base year would be 2019, pre-pandemic. What were your revenue levels pre-pandemic? And then look at all of your revenue sources and comparing 2020, 2021 to that base year. That seems pretty straightforward, but there are areas that we would suggest you haven't really felt the full impact yet, potentially, especially when it comes to income taxes because of how there's a delay. You're not going to see the impact of the pandemic in 2021 necessarily. It's going to be in 2022. So if you are inclined to use some of the 4.46 to kind of reimburse yourself, if you will, for revenue loss, again, kind of have that mindset. We want to set aside some dollars out of the 4.46, work through what those revenue losses have been, estimate what they might be for 2022. And we know income tax is going to be one. Property tax is also a delayed impact where assessments, I don't know every business or every home in Stark County, but I could assume statewide that if it doesn't return to what it was, and you have either businesses that didn't make it or commercial buildings that are going to be used in a different way than they were previously, they may not be assessed as high as they once were. So if that's the case in 21, you're not going to feel that until 22 or maybe even 23. So again, just that, and then you roll in the circuit breaker to all of that. So those are areas within this matrix, if you will, and there may be others that you're thinking of. The county doesn't have utilities, but there are other type. You mentioned the jail. People weren't moving around. Did you have less in terms of traffic infractions? Population at the jail. All
We
of
lost a lot
those.
of money on EMS because people wouldn't go to the hospital.
Right.
Right, EMS, right.
All of those things are pandemic related and can be identified in the revenue loss process and then reimburse the funds that those dollars should flow to.
Now, Indiana, you know, the county's share on the wagering tax. Now, this says no pension funds, but obviously some counties use the casino dollars for
Right.
pension funds. Does that mean though, if there's a shortfall in the wagering, no matter what you use it for?
Sure. I mean, that revenue loss again could go and would be credited to the fund that revenue should have gone to, and then what that fund is able to be used for. Our understanding, you can't take money out of 4.46 and prop up or make your pension fund whole directly.
Right. So that's what it means. It means more of that is you can't positively affect the actuary just with some extra cash in it. But if there was a revenue stream that was feeding that, which happens to be in our case, maybe that. Okay, good. All right.
Revenue and, I mean, infrastructure, there could be not-for-profits or other entities of local government that have been impacted. And I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. There are ways, if you're interested, again, this is a time to be thinking about the art of the possible. What do we want to try to achieve with these monies? Other dollars that maybe you could go after. But there's also ways to help businesses directly. The county can set up a program to do that. You can set up programs to help individuals directly. Those are fairly involved, and you'll have to set a number of program criteria. I'll get into that here in a little bit. But all of those are also eligible uses of this 4.46. All right, some logistics here on page 5. Timing, the money will come in 2 pieces, 2 tranches. The first half is to come within 60 days of the enactment of ARP, which was March 11th. So the first half is to come by May 11th. Oddly enough, probably May 10th at midnight is when we'll get additional guidance from the U.S. Treasury on how we can use those dollars. They're taking adequate time in order to give out additional guidance on these dollars. But the first half in 60 days, or now within a matter of a few weeks or so. The second half within 12 months of the first payment. So roughly early May 2022 will be the second half. So again, just that goes into your thinking of cash flow, lining up use of funds with the expenditures, all that type. Another important deadline or date is 12/31/24. Monies have to be spent. Make sense? Mm-hmm. The process, there is no process for the county. You'll get your money. There are some, and this just came out here in the last couple of days, you need to provide your wiring information, that type of thing to receive your funds. If you get federal money, they probably already have it. And Rachel and I were chatting about that prior to the meeting. So the money the smaller cities and towns throughout the state will get their money from the state. There's going to be an allocation to Indiana to then go out to what's referred to as non-entitlement communities. That's what this language is around. Entitlement communities does include counties that you get your dollars directly. Very different from CARES, where you needed to get your money through the state. And IDA, that's not the case here. It would be directly to the county and for you to administer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the other provisions here, but again, these are other elements of the American Rescue Plan. As you put together your thoughts and ideas of what is the art of the possible, what projects and what do you want to achieve, maybe what you may want to go after, or make sure that your restaurants and bars are fully aware of the funding sources that are out there, maybe be a liaison with them. How can you directly, restaurant or bar, access these dollars if you qualify? So these are other programs that once you get kind of a plan or a master list, if you will, that's where you're headed on what are the projects, what are the areas, or where are the areas that we want to make a difference. Some of these other dollars may be available for consideration as well. So you can probably tell by my words that, before you spend the money, you spend some time thinking about what is the best strategy. And really taking into consideration other resources that the county has. And, just, again, that game of Tetris and matching of the priorities you want to fund and how these dollars can help achieve those initiatives. On slide 8, I talked a little bit about this already, but these are some ideas or areas that your $4.46 million can be used. In the individual assistance, business assistance, you see at the top there, we have worked with clients throughout the country that in the state here that want to help people directly or businesses directly and set up grant programs to do so. If that's of interest to you, that can be set up. I will tell you that it does call for a lot of thought up front in terms of what eligibility you want to establish for individuals or businesses to receive grants. I'm not saying you will do a program like that or should, but if you're contemplating something like that, it is an eligible expenditure. And we've worked with many entities to help get those set up. What are the program criteria? How would you set up applications? How do you receive documentation to make sure they qualify? And again, the theme throughout here, and you've been through, Rachel sounds like the queen of federal audits here for Stark County, but at the end of the day, at this level of funding, there will be federal audits on how the money was spent. So documentation of all of that is critically important. These dollars have to be kept apart and separate from any other dollars of the county. So again, whatever your initiatives are, fitting within these eligible uses, just keep that in mind, that documentation, building the file, because it will be on it at the end of the day. We talked about revenue loss on 9 and 10 already. This is not an exhaustive list, but again, just things to think about, what happened during the pandemic. Businesses closed for a while, the operations were reduced, schools were not open for a while, travel was down. So all of those things happen. And you're already doing this. Think about, okay, how did that impact different revenue sources that the county has? And how do we document that revenue loss and get the money back? I don't know where you're at with fund balances and the impact. We're talking to a number of clients that, through the pandemic, our fund balances actually did pretty well because there were a lot of things that weren't spent. Revenue loss may not be fully felt yet. So, it's not a big issue. Well, just, think very carefully through that because that revenue loss may not be fully felt yet. And some of those funds could have been propped up by CARES money that you've already received or other elements. It just deserves some analysis. So on page 11, these are examples of different types of assistance that can be made available, and there are some specific programs out there for various types of entities, whether it is individuals or businesses. So even if the county does not use any of its 4.46, there are other programs that are available to these types of entities that the county certainly can make or help in the awareness and how do these folks access these types of dollars. If the county I talked about on 12 wants to do or get involved in any kind of direct assistance to non-for-profits, to businesses, to individuals, there are ways to do that within the rules. One thing that is frowned upon is to do it on a head count. I mean, similar to the stimulus checks that people receive throughout the country. That's not what is being encouraged here, to take your money, divide it by the number of people in Stark County and send it out. That's not what they want it to be directed at the people that were impacted the most. And we just got some examples. I'm not here on a marketing pitch, but we do have portals that we have set up for counties to set up these types of programs. These portals will be unique to Stark County, so you can receive applications, receive documentation, work with the Q&A back and forth with the business or the individual. So that if you're interested in that, we can discuss that further. As I mentioned, if you're going to get into any kind of grant programs, there are some key considerations there to consider, which we've listed on slide 14. Economic development. I know that's always key to any county. There are additional dollars if you're involved or contemplating any economic development projects currently within the county. The Economic Development Administration has always been around, but for under the ARP, the EDA or the Economic Development Administration has received additional funding. So if you have projects, economic development projects that are teed up, so to speak, that will increase employment, then any kind of public expenditure that is necessary to affect those projects to increase jobs, there are additional grant dollars out there to go after for any kind of infrastructure, whether it be road, water, sewer, stormwater, those types of public improvements that need to be made. On 16, again, these are other programs that are out there for other types of entities. The reason that we want to raise awareness in this regard, again, is just to think a little bit throughout the county or regionally, who else is getting money? What might they be using dollars on that you don't want to kind of everybody go at the same initiative perhaps, or if the schools can address one thing or there's dollars available to address something else. Just again, that game of Tetris that I keep coming back to. There's some information in here on schools. If you hear the term ESSER, that is the element within ARP that has dollars available to schools directly. So Knox, the schools within Stark County will be receiving and have been receiving monies from CARES, and there's a round 2 of ESSER, and then there's a round 3 that estimates a lot. Those dollars are pretty significant for schools to be receiving, and you can see what they can, it's for lost learning, it's for technology, broadband.
It'd be nice if they pay the teachers.
A lot of different uses for school corporations as well.
One in particular.
So what should you be thinking about or doing now in anticipation of the funds? Just some ideas that we have on 18-19. Sounds like you're already doing some of those things. But we've developed a kind of a readiness checklist on page 19 to things to think about, prepare yourself for receiving the money. How does it fit within the overall initiatives that Stark County has to try to achieve as much as possible? So I've been doing this for a long time. This program is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. And this is one element. We've all heard about the infrastructure bill that President Biden put out a couple of weeks ago. For now, all that discussion is happening at DC, so we'll see what that brings. But initially, dollars in there for the public sector are significant as well. Didn't see a lot of money or any money, quite honestly, in here for roads, bridges. Those are pretty common. The infrastructure bill certainly does address those areas, but gosh, who knows what's going to happen between now and any kind of approval of the infrastructure bill. But it's something that we continue to monitor. We'll pass along whatever information that keeps coming out. It is relevant though, in terms of infrastructure that you may want to address. Bring it all together is our recommendation, because if ARP can't fund it, there may be a program coming that could here in the near term. There's also a bill that is pending regarding additional financing tools for governmental units to consider. This happened coming out of the Great Recession, if you think back about 12 years. So there's some low-cost money that could also be made available here in the near term as well. money's pretty low cost. Anyway, right now,
Depending if it's non-competitive or not, I mean, that's one of the things that always affects small, communities like ours is, so many things are competitive.
Yeah.
And so, the other thing though, I think the thing, just looking at this, since the discussion has started, about it, is that for us, I mean, the good thing is the window's wide. I mean, 2024 is a long way out, and we have no idea of what kind of pain is to come possibly. So, I mean, I think a very conservative approach is going to be the best, as things come. I mean, the understanding is to be, because I think that the media, and not necessarily our media in Stark County, but the mainstream media, I think it's going to have a lot of people when they start talking, because they've already been talking about how individuals can receive the funds. All these other organizations are going to want, the funds. But I mean, for example, like if you've been following your community services communications, they keep saying they're waiting for their FEMA money. A lot of things are being funded right now through other sources. But I mean, this could be bailout money that we need in the future, So I mean, again, conservatism. Now, the thing I'd like to know is if any kind of investments get better, though, if you can invest part of it or not too.
well, we
between now
are
and
certainly, cash
2024, so.
management is an important component here to, you're not going to be spending this money on May 12th.
Exactly.
So try to, what's the best? Probably not. So what is the best avenue? CDs may not be it. What investment tools are out there to get as much return? A 0.5 or 0.6 isn't really, historically speaking, much to. But if you can,
But when we're at
if you're
0.1
only
or
getting
0.2,
0.02 or 0.05.
zero, I should say.
So the other thing that we're seeing in, again, just conversing here, that process is going to be important. And Stark County, I wouldn't imagine is any different than a lot of counties. You're going to get more ideas than you ever imagined when people become, oh, you're going to get a lot of money. Well, here's what you should do with it. So you're going to get a lot of experts in terms of how the dollars should be spent.
We're going to have somebody tomorrow that wants to open up a Walmart and wants us to fund it for them, but they have no collateral to do it. I promise. We've had that.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
So again, and you mentioned it, Dave, I think process is critically important. Transparency is going to be important. At the end of the day, how did you prioritize? And how did you make determinations on where the dollars are going to be allocated? Those are the questions you're probably going to receive and won't be able to answer.
Todd, have you seen other communities, creating any kind of commission or committee or something
Yeah.
to try to bring these all, because it seems like it's you bringing a lot of things together that don't
I think
always
that's
come
what you're
together.
gonna have to have.
And have what do those look like when you
Yeah,
see
we were
them?
talking to Marshall County last week. I couldn't be at their meeting, but as an example, not that you want to be like a neighbor, but also doing a lot of communities are bringing together, member of the commissioners, council, maybe some key department heads or some stakeholders within the community or within the county, just to have a committee to discuss, what the options might be.
Like an advisory committee.
Perhaps some recommendations back to the council and commissioners. Certainly makes sense in terms of getting a kind of a swash, if you will, of the community and what thoughts are out there. So yeah, there are entities that are creating that type of quasi-governmental, they don't have the ability or power to spend money, but just to receive information.
Make recommendations, make a list of suggest priorities and maybe conduct outreach.
But the authority is still completely with the
Yeah.
council.
Of course.
Because
I
you have to
mean-
do the appropriations.
Right. I mean, just so that way there's clarity with that too, as this disseminates, to the masses. Again, because the big part of it, and I think this is probably going to be a time for people that have run for government office, especially county councils across the whole state and in every state. That's what this position is chartered for. But this is going to be one of the most challenging few years that most people, council people, will never see that in their career. So.
On revenue losses, have you heard any talk yet? They're gonna allow us to reimburse the fund that we lost the revenue in, or do we have to spend from the, this fund?
Yeah, you probably saw what the state board put out as far as guidance. A lot of clients weren't real pleased with that guidance, nor was I individually.
Obviously, the answer was Rachel.
What's the old adage, what's it called when you build a 28-step process where you could have done it in 2 steps? There's a name for that. But the Rube model or something?
Rube Goldberg device, right? Yeah.
Purdue.
There you go. So what was my point?
It's
So
more
what the state has
complicated than it
indicated
needed.
is that, these dollars go into your FRF fund. And if you want to use those dollars again for revenue replacement, or revenue loss replacement, the direct thinking would be, okay, you lost 200,000 in road money. Okay, out of the FRF, you put 200,000, no.
It didn't, the legislation doesn't, it isn't just that, the legislation doesn't allow that, I don't think. I mean, so, I mean, I don't
What
know
you have to
why.
do is move appropriations
Right.
over to the FRF money so that the appropriations are not spent out of MPH, for example.
Don't want commingling of funds as part of it. See, I think that was part of the thinking, and they don't want to be
I mean, we
commingling.
do the same thing
This
already.
is the
in
type
Chelsea,
of
so-
response that I've been.
I'm sorry, that's why they do it. I think that's what it is.
It's just, it's ridiculous because that is a harder way to keep track of it than,
Yeah, so the whole accounting aspect of it all, and then ultimately the audit of all that, I mean, whatever help we can provide, but this is not straightforward by any stretch.
You can't, just the way I understood it, you can't spend money from, you can't take money from this and transfer it to any other, that's just a blanket rule. It has to go directly to the thing that it's
Yeah,
being funded.
you have to move the appropriations over and spend it so that MVH then doesn't spend the money, so in effect, it's reimbursed by not spending.
I have a question for
This
you.
is a roundabout way.
I see here there's is the monies are available for public facilities and schools.
I can see why that would be.
Is there any money available for public housing?
Public housing, not out of your FRF money, but out of the ARP money. There is dollars, and I'm not the expert on public housing, but I can get you more information on.
Would you
other-
please?
Yes, I will. But there are programs out there to address housing.
Yes, okay. Yeah, if you would, please, I'd certainly like to have that information. Good.
I'll direct that through Rachel, and then she can.
Okay,
I'll send Todd your email, Don.
okay.
Any other questions or conversations?
Here's a question, or maybe this, could any of this, the complexity be simplified by, probably not, by using funds that are in a rainy day fund and then reimbursing the rainy day fund?
You still have to spend directly from rainy day though.
The expenditures need to be out of the FRF.
Right.
Is the guiding principle at this point. Now, the conversation around, because I think the concept maybe you're talking about is, do these dollars need to be used to supplement what the county is currently doing? Or can these dollars be used to supplant what the county is currently doing? Two very different concepts. And the ability to supplant is there, but the accounting of it is not as direct as what you were just describing.
Right. Yeah, that does complicate it, doesn't it?
It seems to me, and I understand that you're just interpreting this as you're giving us information as you get it. I understand that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It sounds like the most beneficial is what we have lost in the last 2 years or possibly to lose in the future as far as county revenue. This money is going to be very helpful for that. I think everybody understands that. The rest of the funds, to me, I feel is going to be strictly governmentally dictated to us how we can use it. Us as a governing body, as a county council, and and you guys as the commissioners, we know what's best for Stark County, not the federal government. And I have a feeling that the federal government, other than backing up what we have lost in revenue, we would have to prove that, and that's very provable and understandable. But the rest of the money, doesn't sound like we got a big decision in how we're gonna spend it right
No.
now, right? I mean, I don't know if you disagree with me, but as this,
I think you're on the right track. We'll have, the 4.4 million, and that's it. Everything else that's in this bill, that was yay thick when I printed it out. That's all federally managed, and the process by which that's going to be distributed hasn't been defined yet.
Right.
And probably won't be defined until well after May 11th.
Yeah, patience is gonna be key.
yeah,
We'll do our best to disseminate, interpret information so that you all can, but I think you do have some discretion in terms of how you want to impact the county in what way, transformational or otherwise, or to help those that have been impacted the most. So there is some flexibility within the, but there definitely are guardrails
right.
in terms of what the dollars can be used for, and specifically pension, what they cannot be used for.
But can be in a roundabout way.
Yeah, indirectly, right?
That's the supplanting concept, yes.
How creative can we get with our accounting?
Well, actually, they were supposed to do a work study on this, the whole pension issue, because it's a statewide problem in Indiana, and I've complained about it several times, but we got a response from, the legislators that they were going to work on that for us, but.
Well, even if you could just replace the money that was lost in gambling revenue.
Yeah.
That'll help.
Yeah, that's there.
That
That's
looked
there,
pretty
so-
painful,
Yeah.
in that situation.
Especially if we can go back to 19.
Yeah, what about how far back can you go?
For what?
You can go back to the beginning of the pandemic, essentially.
For revenue loss?
Yeah,
Yeah, 19 is the base year, so
right,
you compare 20 to 19, 21 to 19,
right, okay,
22 to 19.
That'll be helpful,
right, that'll help. I don't know, what is that, that's 100,000 or, yeah?
at least, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely want to focus on the bad news.
Yeah.
Terrible way to put it.
Trying
Now,
to,
the other thing to consider, and I don't know everything about Stark County like you all do, but I know a few things. But in terms of, like, if you have the opportunity for economic development, and I know there's solar farms and all this out there for not only Stark County, but many counties, and we're involved in a lot of those. The reason I bring that up is that for this to be as impactful as possible, it needs to be woven into the current and near current situation that the county may be in. And what I mean by that is the revenue loss, for example, to property tax dollars or changes in assessed value certainly is potentially there. I can see that. But something that potentially is impactful as a solar farm that, again, can be transformational to the county, and what that means to tax base and other ways that those deals are put together may minimize greatly, any loss that you could have on the property tax from the pandemic. So yes, you could reimburse property taxes, but with that other potentially pending, then maybe those dollars are more impactful used in a different way.
I mean, so you have a growth rate, and let's say you have a growth rate in residential assessments that are, it's like, it's pretty robust, maybe 4 or 5% per year, okay? And then it ends up, it's 3% instead. When you have a line, then the increase slows down. I mean, do you have to show a drop, or can you show a loss in what would have been increased? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, again, part of I'm going to preface again my response.
Sure, I know
More guidance
we're
coming.
guessing a little here. We're definitely
More guidance
guessing a
coming.
little bit. Yeah.
Because we have been discussing a lot internally as well, same thing for income tax. That in high growth areas, seeing 4, 5, 6, 8% growth in AGI, well, then you go back to something that was flat or 2 or 3. It wasn't a decline potentially, but it was a decline in the increase that the county has been felt, that has been incurring. So there is language there that if you have a projection that was pre-pandemic that showed and then you did not achieve that projection because of the pandemic, then there's some room there to,
Argue that's a loss.
yeah,
I mean, the same can be said of, I mean, obviously, if you're making 4% interest and you're only making 1% interest, you know, that 3%, you still made 1%. Well, you made 1%. Well, that's a 3% loss over what you
Right.
projected. So possibly that's still going to be available, because I think we had a pretty robust increase going in assessed valuations, actually.
right.
And
And even on the investments, you have to, I think, compare apples to apples, that if your dollars available to invest changed from 19 to 21, but your rate of investment went down, then you need to normalize that. So
Right.
that your interest income, even though you're probably down, you probably would have been down even more.
So have you been tracking the AGR from like 19 to now? I mean, that'd be, I wonder, is that how they calculated
We
who?
do have, I don't have it memorized.
Right.
but yes,
I
we
just,
have
I just
access.
wonder though, is the state looking at that at all? I mean, just to see how they dole this money out and.
Well, the state has no say in that.
Right, we get the money. It's a question of justifying spending it.
But somebody
Right.
decided we were getting 4.4 million. They must have used some number to do that.
I told you at the beginning, don't ask me how to calculate.
That's why I'm saying maybe it was AGR. Like they must have they had to have gotten advice from the state though on how much they should give each county. They had, like, who did that?
That was at the federal level, not the state level. All of the allocations to the counties around the country came from the US Treasury or the state or federal level.
Very quiet, we're lone wolves.
Because the dollars, again, coming to Stark County or any county are not flowing through the state this time,
Right.
like they did
Yeah.
during CARES.
Am I right in saying that basically, what you're doing is you're justifying your expenditure? You're not, I mean, is there, getting back to this thing, is there some application that you have to provide showing that, so like in terms of lost revenue, if you have what we have to come to something that we believe is a justifiable calculation of lost revenue. And then that there's a document somewhere, or do we file something with somebody, or what, how do
Just
we?
wait till the
We put
audit.
it in the file.
We wait until they ask,
Yeah.
right? And then
Again, that's
we defend our position.
Yeah,
And they'll-
Huh,
and they'll
Okay,
probably
that makes sense
ask
to me.
before the second distribution, from what I read.
but again, you're not gonna potentially incur or feel all that revenue loss at that time.
So what does the Fed have as a clawback if people don't use it by the 31st of 24?
Oh, the money will go back.
Just as they deposited
And
using all the
withdraw.
numbers that you provide them for electronics transfers, they'll just reverse it.
Close that account.
Typically, the Fed gives stuff away and then they're supposed to take it back and they never take it back. So I was just curious
Probably best
if
not to test.
there's any
that.
clawback.
Yeah, let's not find out.
I don't think we're gonna have any problems with
One of the
it. We've
things
got
that
some
we're
things that
also-
we want to do.
And again, I don't know if this is relevant to you all or not, but something that we're also asking the question, looking for guidance, because we have some folks that are wanting to think about setting up their own revolving fund, where out of this dollars that the county would receive, is it a legal expenditure to set up a revolving fund that you can loan out to communities, to whomever, that would be paid back, and then it's perpetual. You spent the money by putting the money into the revolving fund by 12/31/24, but then that money works for years as opposed to spend and go.
Well, I mean, but you're just making the assumption though that unsecured loans are gonna be successful. I mean, that,
I am making that assumption.
yeah, I'm not making that assumption here. I'm
I'm
sorry.
not making the assumption they should be unsecured, but.
Well, that's the thing though, is because, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but then how does the county
I'm not saying
get
you should.
involved?
I'm
No,
just
no,
saying-
I like the idea of it. No, I mean, because that's one thing that people
you-
will be asking for, and it's something we're gonna have to
And
think
whether
about is,
4 I
if
mean,
we
that's a
did do
lot of
it.
money, don't get me wrong, right? 4.4 million, but
We were supposed
in the
to be
grand
doing
scheme,
economic
I mean,
development.
there are counties out there that are getting 70, 60, 80 million dollars.
yeah, that's why I asked the question if they used AGR or what they used, because I mean, in terms of just
There's
determining.
socioeconomic, there's population, there's lots of things.
Well, we were just at the Indiana Economic Development meeting the other day, and we got told that they really can't help small communities like ours. So I mean, I think when it comes to economic development, Stark County should qualify for the highest tier of funding. I'm just, just my own Stark County pride, but I'm just getting a little bit tired. Always getting the short end of the stick here, and so like this could be the thing that does kickstart something for us, because we do realize we have to help ourselves, and we're going to. So with your help, I'm sure, different things, but.
But getting back to like, it seems like they're saying that normally they want this money to be spent on things that would have been spent, they don't want you to spend it on new things, they want you to spend generally.
Spend on what, I'm sorry?
You know, is that right, that it's supposed to be spent primarily on new, I mean, on existing, you know, obligations that you have that you might have difficulty meeting, or is that not true?
No, I don't think that's necessarily.
Oh, good, okay.
That's the way I understood it.
But there's some of that, I mean, that's where I think the policy, do we supplement, or do you want to supplement what you're currently doing? Now, you want to be careful not to set up something that's going to have expenses beyond 24. Now, all of a sudden, you don't have the resources for it, right? So I'm not sure, but for one-time expenditures, it could be something that is not currently on your radar, but now that you have some funding, and it could be impactful. Or, so it could be a mix of either, I think, Marty, of supplanting what, and that's what I meant by, do you supplant or do you supplement?
Right.
And if you supplant, you know, with dollars that you're already planning on spending and legally use some of these dollars for that purpose, then the effect of that would be increasing your fund balance because you're not spending money that you're currently getting.
Right.
And that is a way to enhance financial position. It's also a way to kind of extend the deadline beyond 24. Because
I just thought that I saw some language in there that, you know, other than these infrastructure projects, the water, sewer, and not applicable there, but not applicable to water, sewer, and connectivity. Then it was supposed to be existing obligations that you were, you know, that were, you know, you're having trouble funding due to loss of revenue, but that might, hopefully maybe that isn't the case, because that is kind of limited. Okay.
Might do. Got it. Could you also copy me on that housing information? But what I'd also like if you have information on government housing.
Okay.
Because that's one of our biggest problems in Stark County, and we've kind of individually and together talked about this. We've done a lot of charrettes about Stark County, you know, like aside from the educational side of what lacks for our economic development is we just don't have enough people. And we don't have enough dorm style housing, for example, to get young people don't like to buy houses anymore. They like to rent or rent apartments, things like that. So I'm also curious about, in a situation like this, the ability of a government to start a government housing.
I'll send you Dave's email out too.
sorry,
I'll send you Dave's email too.
Okay.
You might have it, but
I might, just to make sure.
right.
Well, I hope it was helpful.
Very much.
Very.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated.
Thank you for coming. On such short notice too.
A town.
Well, as you think about it, as we get more information, I live only 20 minutes or so, glad to come back but I hear you on the connectivity. If you can get that just over the county line into Marshall, just a bit.
It's unbelievable. But I mean, you know, the excuses that CenturyLink makes for what a bad product that they give us here are just out of this world. I mean, honestly, I'm just at the point where if they just say, look, just deal with it. That's what we have. But that's what it is. The wiring, you walk by and it's run over on all the roads and they just leave it. And you call them up and it's like, should I put a plastic bag over it? Like, especially on the fire side, you're like, oh, somebody ran. Oh, no, just leave it. It'll be all right. Yeah, but it's exposed to the element. Oh, it'll be all right. It's like, really? You know, it's Stark County, so it's no big deal. I just, you know, I'm tired of that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are you sticking around for a minute, Todd?
I'm sorry?
Are you sticking around for a minute? I just have a question for you.
Sure, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Stark County,
It's not about here.
we haven't had any.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have training yesterday, but we had to cancel it. Your shirt. Yeah. Need one?
You and I are thinking the same way.
I know.
All that money.
My mouth shut.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, you know what? Your radiothon is always good. I'm gonna challenge my colleagues here.
Please, yeah.
Well, except for Brad, 'cause he's a lot richer than I am.
Four.
You have children before.
Four of them.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat with you. The Stark County Youth Club, we're a youth development agency. We support kids and families right here in Stark County. We meet critical needs for safety, learning, and personal growth. And we do that by providing after-school, summer, and enrichment programs to kids all across our community. We do that every day after school. We do it through the summers. We do it over spring break. And let me tell you how happy I am to be back in person with you. We've been back with our kids in person since August, and it was a learning curve. And I think we really saw tremendous commitment from our teams and a lot of connection from our kids. You know, it's different, like schools are different. We have a lot of safety protocols, we have more staff, but one thing is fortunately constant for us, and that's that we're able to provide safety, love, commitment to those kids when they come to see us. We talk all the time about how resilient kids are, but the truth is kids can't be resilient without a network of support around them. They need an entire community to make sure they grow up healthy, to make sure they grow up and become citizens who are contributing members of society rather than delinquents. They need loving adults. They need the rigorous academic content we provide. They need to have a lot of fun with us. And we're lucky that that's what we get to do for our kids and our families in this community. We have three big picture goals. We want to keep kids safe. We want them to learn. And we want them to have good, healthy relationships with us and with one another. You know, when we're talking about academic exploration for us, that's everything from learning how to do basic math, because some of our kids haven't learned basic math yet, to learning about what's happening in another country, or learning that kids in Japan don't sound like them, don't look like them, but are still humans. And it's part of our responsibility to help kids learn that whether they live in Stark County or somewhere else in the world, it is their responsibility to be a good human and to respect other people and to treat others with dignity. That's one of our goals, to make sure kids grow up in this community, love this community, and want to give back to it. I think that's a really important character trait for kids that they can learn and then they can show to others. We just completed spring break programs and we're planning for summer, and we're dreaming and scheming a little bit at club. You know, one of the things that the pandemic taught us was that we can be creative in the way we serve our community. And it also showed us what gaps we saw in the community. And so we are conducting a community needs assessment soon. We need information about what we think there are as gaps in terms of care for kids, in terms of daycare, in terms of all of the before school care, all of those things. We know what we think, but we need this community to tell us what do you need? What are you willing to pay for? What is there that's most critical, so that we can focus on that and start taking the steps to provide it for our community.
Can I ask you something?
Absolutely.
Were you involved at all with the effort that they were trying to do in Knott with the Knights of Columbus building with a shelter for? Have you ever heard the statistic, I don't know if it's current now or not, but at the time they were saying that 28 youths had no place to live, that they were sleeping in the cars and things like that. Do you think that those numbers are pretty accurate?
I think those might be depressed numbers, actually. When we, and if it's okay, I'll tangent on that a little bit. When we talk about homeless youth, what we understand is that those aren't just kids who are living in a car. Those are kids who are couch surfing. So they have a roof over their head for tonight. And then tomorrow night, they're under somebody else's roof.
I did mention that too, yeah.
And we see that at club. I have kids who, they're living here for a month, and then something happens in that dynamic, and that family can't keep them with them anymore. And those kids, and maybe it's their mom, maybe they move again. And so they don't just move from house to house, but sometimes they are moving to a hotel and then back in with an aunt, and then they're moving again and moving again. So that's a homeless child. They have a roof over their head tonight. They don't have a permanent residence. The consistency and continuity in a kid's life is critical. It's one of those things that is considered an adverse childhood experience. So all that homelessness, that inconsistency leads to things later in their lives, like inability to find work, poorer health, higher incidence of drug and alcohol abuse, a lot of negative outcomes. What are protective factors around kids who have those adverse experiences are things like clubs, activities, extracurriculars, lots of adults and people around them who love them and who take care of them and give them a structured environment to go to where people are there that they can depend on. You know, I talk about the activities that we do at club because they're fun. Like we teach kids to build robots and we teach kids how to cook, and all of that is great. Like the content is cool and it supports academic achievement. But the bottom, like the foundation of all of that is they build a relationship with a staff member at our program. And that connection to another human is what makes them feel safe and loved. That's what helps them then make better choices in their lives because they know somebody who cares about them. I would never say that their families don't care about them. Most of their families are just doing the best that they can. And they might be making choices that I don't agree with and you don't agree with, but that family feels like they're doing the best they can. Our job is to be there to support that kid so that they learn potential is there for them. They can do what, like, even in just this moment, they can learn to make a choice that's better for them than maybe they have made before. When we talk about teaching kids social and emotional skills, that's one of the things we're talking about. I grew up in a home where I didn't learn skills like that, that I didn't learn how to manage my anger in a way that I know some of my kids now know how to manage anger. We all face frustration, anger, things in your life go wrong, and we don't all learn the skills how to cope with that and how to manage your own anxiety or how to manage whatever emotional context you have as a natural result of interacting with other human beings. At Club, we're really lucky. We're starting to teach kids, here's what you do when you feel like you want to scream, when you feel like you want to punch somebody, here's what you're going to do instead. When kids learn those skills and start to implement them in their lives, that long-term result is all those things we want for them. They have healthier interpersonal relationships. They're less likely to use drugs and alcohol. They then become productive members of society because they know how to manage themselves. They're not constantly getting in trouble, getting pulled over, getting in fistfights. It is their ability to manage themselves and their emotions, which is huge. It's critical for them. So those are things that we work on at Club to try and build a community of, you know, really good people. Because we think our kids are all good kids. They just need to learn skills so that they behave like that people look at them and say, oh yeah, look at that kid. That kid's gonna be something. I want every kid to be something. Because they all have that potential. I know, when I first heard about it, I thought, oh no, that's not a problem here, but it really is. So I said we're going to be doing a community needs assessment. We want to hear what those gaps are. How do we solve with all the rest of this community those problems? How do we at least step into the gap and provide something that doesn't exist now, take a step toward it? So that takes information, so we have to ask, but it also takes resources. You know, it would be a lie if I said, oh, with a great wish and a good heart, we're going to make all that happen. It's not what you do. And so I come to talk about the radiothon because it's our time of the year when we go on air, we talk about the program, we talk with our kids, our families come on air and talk about the work that we do. And we ask you to make a pledge of support for our kids, to stand up with us and to say that the future of these kids is valuable to you and that you will put your name on air or even do it anonymously and stand up with our kids with your pledge of support. We know that this community is incredibly generous and supportive. And we need that. We need that so that we can stay vital and strong for those kids and families. How about questions?
Did you see a change between 19 and 20 on your, can you email me about that?
Sure. There were lots of changes, specifically what in terms of like.
In the
what our
revenue that
radio-
you, yeah,
Yep.
or just your overall,
Yeah. Yeah. it
can you
was a
email me that? Or
Significant.
let's,
difference.
we
Yeah.
can meet on it maybe, or.
And it's such,
You're gonna
you're
fill
such, my daughter
At
took
least I'm gonna
advantage
try to
of
present
using
something.
you club. I picked her up at 5 o'clock at night. She'd come out and say, hey, Dad, look what we made today, you know, and she really enjoyed it. I think you got a great organization. In situations where you feel a child
That's crazy.
is deprived at home,
Mhm.
Is lacking, is needing, will you do interaction with parents, or is that?
That's a really good question.
You see what I hope you can, is what I mean.
So because we are not set up to work directly with parents so we host education components for parents.
Right,
But that's not specific, like one-on-one intervention with
Okay.
parents.
okay,
So we would refer a parent to another agency
Okay.
who is trained to do
I guess
that.
my question, if you've seen a child that really needed some help in a specific area,
Yeah.
you could lean on somebody to get that child help.
Absolutely. So we're really lucky in this community, I think, that the nonprofits and the service agencies, we all know one another basically. And so I kind of know, oh, I have a kid who, this is a real story. I had a kid whose family couldn't afford his meds. But I knew who to call to put that family in touch with a resource for them. And I had multiple resources that family then could take, talk to and get help for that kid. Yeah, there are lots of benefits to being a small community. I know a lot of people like, I think we're great. I think we're great because it's a real benefit to be a close-knit community. It's powerful. It is useful for our kids. Yeah. What other questions can I answer for you?
I just got a comment.
Okay.
I'm with the American Legion Riders in Knox, and we contacted you last year
Yeah.
because the benefit we did, we were gonna give them half of the money.
Oh, that's nice.
Because my granddaughter takes advantage of it, and it's a good thing.
Thank you.
And if we're planning on doing it this year, and if we do half the money, it's still gonna
Thank
go
you
to,
so much.
go to you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Yay. I always say, like sometimes folks will say, well, I don't have a kid in the program. And I always feel like, well, that's okay because you live in this community. Like some people really do feel that way, that they don't have a kid in the program. And so the program they don't put a high priority on the program. And I ask people to think about it from a community standpoint. What do who do you want living next to you? A kid who has good skills and can be polite, and a kid who like grows up valuing who we are and being a good person? Or do you want, a kid who hasn't had a lot of support and hasn't had a lot of guidance or structure in their lives? And we want them to grow up to be good citizens. So that's what we're here to do. I really appreciate getting to come and chat with you, especially. It was nice.
I challenge all of my board colleagues to participate.
You're awesome.
Absolutely.
Bet.
Remind me.
I see Mandy's on there.
Yeah, so Mandy, go ahead and unmute yourself. Mandy would like to transfer $19,875 from the redaction fund, which is $49.20, to the recorder's preparation fund, which is $49.05, to pay their annual software contract to Fiddler. She did give me verification from the State Board of Accounts that this transfer is justifiable, so I just need a motion on that.
Make a motion that would transfer the $19,875 from Fund 4920.00481.000.0000 to the Recorder's Perpetual Fund, which is 4905.501.00.00 .000.0000.
You kill her.
A motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Todd. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed?
And then Mandy, I'll go ahead and let you explain, some of you may remember during this last year, for her to be able to spend $500 in postage out of her one fund, she needs this resolution, but why don't you give them a short rundown, Mandy?
It takes it from using the postage money out of the county general and puts it on using it out of the recorder's perpetuation fund.
It requires an annual
It-
ordinance, and it's, quite routine, I would say. To be blunt, it really, it's the same as, you have to do it over every year under the statute.
The only problem is the ordinance isn't updated with the members. I noticed it has Freddie Baker on there. And Bob Sue.
What?
Fred Baker, Bob Sims.
So we just cross it out.
Yeah.
Just cross it out. Sorry about that. I'll correct it and give you a new one.
What number is it? So I can make the motion.
Mandy, what number is your perpetuation fund again?
It's that 4905.
But the
No,
ordinance number.
what ordinance number?
Oh.
That's all I want.
Don't say the number, just say the-
Make a motion to approve the ordinance for the use of recorders records perpetuation fund for the year of 2022.
I'll update the names and send that in. It doesn't need to be signed now. I'll just fix it so it's not.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Do you want me to
All
sign?
those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Opposed. What was the response from Kathy?
Not to be discussed now,
She doesn't even want to discuss it all.
not right now.
Okay, cool. Well, I just have one thing before I ask everybody else. It's actually something that you're aware of too. Could you let the assessor know that we'd like to have the assessor come to the next meeting? We'd like to talk about assessed value again. Marty and I have been two people that have been talking about this for years. It was brought to my attention by a resident, and Brad knows about it too. It's been more than one time where they're looking at their home and they say, it's worth 150,000. And they look at the assessment locally and somebody down the street has a house that's worth 150,000 and that's only being assessed at 7,000.
Yeah.
So we need an update on this gap. And we've been bringing this up.
If you can find an example of it.
A lot of it was in
I can
Hamlet.
bring the example. Actually, Brad could provide the example.
A lot of it was in Hamlet.
Yeah.
The one house was 7,000. The one beside it was 27,000. The one beside it was 190,000. Yes, there's a difference, but there's not that big a difference.
It's not with the new taxing. It's not supposed to be.
We're talking about the assessment, not the tax rate. I mean,
Right.
not.
Right.
Depends on a lot of factors, right, Marty? I mean, we know what that's.
Well, yeah, as you know, John does, it's quite sophisticated,
How
actually.
it's rated, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much.
Yeah, it really is. So it'd be interesting to see these examples. And I would suggest actually taking an example of it to John. He may be able to explain it to you right away.
Well, it just might be of value for the council to understand.
Sure,
I was thinking, as an exercise, Brad could provide you with, some of those, just so we know. I thought.
He's actually the person that does, isn't that fair to say? John Vivieros is the
Yeah.
one who actually does the calculations.
Right. It always does, Bob.
Which I understand that there's things that you can get so that you don't pay as much, but your house should still be assessed
No,
for
that
what it's
wouldn't,
worth.
you're right, that
You're
wouldn't
right.
affect the assessment.
that's the
That would,
problem.
those are
Right.
exemptions.
Are we talking net assessed value? Because that's the big variable.
No, you're probably talking before any deduction.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The gross
According
assessed
to-
value.
Yeah, that's where all your.
Like
other stuff comes in.
what your house is actually worth, not the reductions that you have,
Okay.
but what it's actually worth.
The actual assessed value.
There's not,
Maybe
I'm sorry, but there's not one house in Hamlet that's only worth $7,000
Not anymore.
because they're selling the land that the houses
For
are on
more
for
than
I saw a
$11,000.
house go for over a $250,000 in Hamilton.
And that's just one example. It's rampant in the whole county. I've looked it up many times. It drives me nuts.
And it
But
might
I'd
be
love to-
something, because like by the time, it goes up to my office and we process it, it could be the softwares that are, because it goes through a lot of different software transfers before it
Okay,
actually
so-
gets billed.
It should be within 10% of the actual fair market value.
Technically,
That I can
yes.
tell you that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I don't know that I want to go that
I don't
far.
really-
But
That's a different ball of wax.
That's
to
the
peel
rule, though.
back
That's the
into.
rule.
Yeah.
That's the rule they're supposed to go by.
Yeah.
That's what it should be.
Well, that's why in theory, it just doesn't match, and I've been
Don't put
saying
this
that
on the
for
radio,
years.
but I can tell
Right,
you, my
crazy.
house is worth a heck of a lot more than what it's assessed for in the county.
Yeah, I don't want my.
What's your guess? They tend to lag 7%.
Yeah, it's a lot more than 7%.
And then one just real fast update, we did have an EMA advisory council meeting today. We're gonna move forward with advertising we approached the commissioners and they approved that we would advertise for part-time with the potential for full-time, so we could attract both sides with that. Brad and I will manage the EMA, any EMA needs that come up between then. I said I would take first call on it, but he'll take second call. Hopefully it's a short window, but so anything which we kind of have been doing that anyways. We finished the LEPC.
Granted, it wasn't a packed meeting today.
That's true too. So
So there was nobody
yeah,
there?
he got railroaded into it, but but
It was a 2-1 vote. Brad lost.
But, one of the things I was just thinking about though, after the meeting and just since we're together and Mark's here, is that retired people would be a good candidate for this, I said before. Do we put an ad on the radio for that position too?
No.
Is it just where does it go?
How much do you want to spend on this?
Well, I'd like to put an ad on the radio to attract retired people, because a lot of them listen to the radio.
That's not my department.
But we,
But I mean, I can't approve it though, because, Mark's,
but to advertise into the KVI, it costs. So,
Yeah.
She'll give us a deal, free.
Well,
I just heard it. come from her mouth.
theoretically though, we should be able to take that out of the EMA budget.
Is that a conflict of interest?
yeah, that's true. We can, and
I mean, I just think that's a good way to try to find people like that, because
we
they
still need a
do.
good deal.
Or in the report, somebody could put, when she's reporting on the radio, that we are
With somebody.
somebody over that direction.
I know Mark was gonna look at the military,
Work one should continue to be a free
Retirees.
resource for us. I think. There's two different sides of that. There's the veteran service side and a regular job services side. I think you've got contacts with both now, so we can go that route, work one.
and then the last reminder was just the county picnic is May 21st.
One's Janice Hernandez.
So,
She's the president. of the
and if,
county.
I don't have anything ready for the firewall, but I have gotten a communication though from Lisa, just haven't had a chance to mess with it, but.
Does work one. She's the president of economic development.
Stark County was approved for our $250,000 Oka grant.
That's good.
Yeah, Brian and I went to 10 bars
Yes.
and never drank.
$100,000 will go to businesses in nonprofit, or not, sorry. $100,000 will go to businesses that are in the non-incorporated areas of Stark County, but also including Hamlet. And $150,000 is going to go
Yeah.
to
Who knows?
towards
that.
food to residents.
Wait a minute, how
The
much
reason-
for
the
food
reason only
residents?
Hamlet's because North Judson and Knox got
Correct.
independent, just for clarity. It wasn't that they're excluded, it's that they got independent lists. and
You
since
say
Hamilton didn't-
not-for-profits not included?
Not-for-profits are not included,
People asking.
yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Did anybody else on the council have anything?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion, is there a second?